Welcome back to Boon or Bust, and I say I'm talking here as someone who's crestfallen. Well, I'm crestfallen because I've been accused of rabbiting on in the last episode and not getting to the point. And this time we really do want to get to the point because we're looking at what is holding back the embrace of AI. And we referred to the RBA report and saying what firms are telling us about AI. And Matt, what are some of the insights? What are they telling us about why is AI adoption lagging?
I think one of the key reasons here, Peter, is a lack of skills in many ways and capability when it comes to organizations being able to effectively deploy AI. But I would also say it's kind of the skills capability, but it's a mindset as well, I think, for many. And I think it's really translating benefits to the users, to the employees, versus the risks and challenges many of them perceive as well. But it's kind of that classic chicken and egg scenario, Peter, at the end of the day, because we can talk about needing to have the right skills and capabilities, but we don't necessarily give our people the headspace, the time, the capability to build up their skills in this current environment. For many of them, they don't have the luxury, right? So this is where we need to reframe that conversation into what does productivity improvement really look like, right? It should look like, here's 20% time for me to train you in AI, right?
Okay, well, it's interesting. I'll come to that point because the first thing that you said to me is we need to equip people with the skills for harnessing AI. And yet, it is that chicken and egg situation. You don't know the skills you need till you've actually tried to use the technology and found where you've got frustration. So one of the skills that people are talking to me a lot about, and Matt, it's an area that I know you've got more and more proficient on over the last year, is prompt engineering. You know, what is the prompt that you need to put into AI to get an output that makes sense, that helps you, gives you the answer you're looking for? And that's not and you told me it's through sort of trial and error that you've got to that sort of point. So is that not the way we always learn?
Yes, it is. You know, that trial and error piece as well. And it's also getting cohorts of, champions together as well within organizations to help with that. Because, you can say learn, like, feel your way along when it comes to prompt engineering. But I was talking to the CIO of, a very large education facility here, like further education facility here in Australia. And what she was saying to me was that you can talk about this kind of prompt capabilities, but they need to start building that into curriculums within schools. So this needs to start from the ground up. And it's a great, speaker, Ken Robinson. He's deceased now, but he talked about the need to really, and I'd encourage anybody to look up Ken Robinson on YouTube and look at his thoughts on how we need to reset the conversation around education. I think right now, more than ever, that's where we need to start. Of course, we have a workforce of billions of people around the world, so we need to help train them as well. But really, we're thinking about the next generation coming through, and not just the next generation of people, but the next iterations of AI, quantum, post-quantum cryptography, all those sort of areas. Now is the time to educate from the ground up, so the next generation of workers are ready for this.
Matt, you're talking to a man from a family of teachers. His mother was a teacher, his brother's a teacher, his sister's a teacher. And I worry that sometimes we expect teachers to suddenly miraculously understand everything new. And I feel quite strongly that actually we've got to invest in those teachers.
Absolutely,
we've got to make sure that it's a valuable job in a modern world. It isn't some sort of poor job. If you're a teacher, you should be able to afford a house in a place like Sydney.
Yeah, but that's what the CIO was talking about, Peter, as well, right? It's one thing to say we've got to educate the children, but you got to start with the educators at the end of the day. And that's the same within most organizations. I had another conversation I was having a few weeks ago. They were talking about how it's not even necessarily cohorts of champions, but it's identify one or two people within each team who's really setting the world on fire when it comes to leveraging AI through the right prompt capabilities. And learn from them to help educate others within the organization as well. But we're going off on a bit of a tangent.
We are going off on a tangent because I'm getting back to the thought is, what does this mean for CEOs? What have they got to do to harness AI? And I think we've got to actually have some space in the agenda where the organization's employees are encouraged, not encouraged, even commanded to actually make work with AI. I hear, for example, the CBA, I think, is it 2 days a week? You've got to have some time using AI or something like that.
Yep.
So we've got to make something to make sure it becomes accessible. But back to your earlier point, we've got to actually say, what is the advantage of the employee doing this? Are they going to be worried this is a job replacing action? No, maybe we give them more money because they're AI literate. They've got some skill sets. They're demonstrating a willingness to embrace it.
I think so. You got a reward for that. But also, when you come back to your point around the CEO, it really needs to be kind of a top-down, bottom-up approach to this as well. So it's all well and good to say we've got to educate employees around, the right way to prompt, the right way to get the right outcomes from AI. But we need to start from the top and educate the CEO, the board, in terms of what they can do more effectively as well. Because I think there's an awful lot of, people throwing expectations over the wall without actually walking the talk in many ways.
Exactly. Well, Matt, I know you've interviewed this person, but I also went to a study or a workshop where people from the Lendl Group were presenting what they've done, Lendy Group, I should say, what they've done. And what came out clearly was this was driven by the CEO right down. He was the guy walking the talk. He was the guy setting the expectations, getting people engaged, getting their thoughts and views. It's quite an impressive story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's a great point to sort of bring up as well, Peter, in terms of that leadership and driving it down from the top, because those typically the organizations who are accelerating innovation and productivity the fastest as well. And, to be honest with you, it's quite often, it's those digital native companies. It's those digital first, cloud first style organizations. They're really leading the charge. You brought up CBA earlier on. Don't want to sort of appear like a poster child for CPA, so to speak. But as we've talked about before, they're not a bank. They're a technology company.
Yeah.
And many of the other banks are sort of struggling to kind of keep up with them and get to that same level at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and what the Lendy Group did was actually set targets about the embrace of AI. There were certain times we want this process to be driven by AI by 2026. Things like that are actually quite impressive. But what worries me about AI is people think, and you have a term for this, Matt, where people, a glorified spell checker is what you say. There's a lot of people use AI.
Yep.
And it's like, I use it to construct a letter or an email. I'm using AI. But AI is more than that. If we're going to really harness AI, we've got to be embedding it in processes and workflows in systems.
Tell you a secret, I never use AI to compose an email, Peter.
Well,
I might use it to help me with other things, but I think that's one area where you still need that personal approach to things in many ways, because people can read through that in a million years. And I know there's a tendency to see that as a great productivity improver, but it's clear as day when that's happening. But you're getting me on a rant. We came up with a term on a podcast the other week, called it a rant cast, right? So rather than a podcast.
Matt, it's engagement. People, your ranting gets people listening intently to what you're about to say. Right. But what I'm also thinking, Matt, is we've got to actually start using AI in a way that it looks at the problems in an organization and actually is constructing a quote or a proposal. Is that a problem? Or is a problem the fact it takes us 6 days to get a product to somebody that we've sold? How can we short circuit that sort of type of stuff? I think it's the inefficiencies in our organization. And I think that's more important than actually as a personal productivity tool for people.
I agree, and that comes back to the comments you made in the previous episode, Peter, in terms of that sort of customer differentiated offerings, and that's exactly it, And it's not just about when the product's going to arrive or how fast it's going to arrive, it's the knowing as well. And you talked about, again, the ProMite or whatever earlier on, but again, it's kind of knowing where things are or knowing when things are going to be delivered. I mean, that's where AI, I think, can help ultimately.
Yeah, but I also have a real strong feeling, Matt, that sometimes what people might think some work is arduous or tiresome, but sometimes there's gain in some of that work. Actually, it is the process of gathering that stuff that gives you insights. I was doing a exercise for a round table I was running for a group of agricultural organizations, and I wanted to look at the data on what is the sentiment in the agricultural sector in Australia. And there was a map in a PDF format. So I said to ChatGPT, compose that into a PowerPoint for me, and it came up with all this erroneous data. It wasn't the exact chart. So I ended up doing it myself. But actually, in the process of doing it, I started to get insights. Actually, the agriculture sector is very volatile. Sentiment goes up and down very quickly. And that I thought was an interesting point about we've got to use the times when it's positive to make hay while the sun shines, so to speak. And I think that was an insight that I thought was quite useful to get. And I think sometimes those insights come from some of that arduous work.
It does. It's that classic kind of human in the loop conversation we're having, Peter, as well, when it comes around. And I think our friends at Deloitte could probably have done with it a little bit more of that.
Well, they could certainly. Our good friends at Deloitte, we should say. We all learn.
We all learn. But I guess building on from that, I kind of want to set us up for our next conversation, Peter, because we've been talking around, productivity, the paradox, how AI can help, how we can accelerate innovation, reduce productivity. And when we think about innovation particularly, there's some really interesting things happening in terms of how some of the technology providers are thinking about setting us up to be able to really leverage our in the future. And we're going to talk about what we're calling moonshots and misfires when it comes to AI in the next episode.
Is there anything wrong with ambition, is what Matt's saying.
But not ambition at all costs, right, Peter? So till the next time, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.